This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From NotAPipePublishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
Today's secret word is CRISPR.
If I take my time.
Salutations! Hail and well met, readers and reviewers. Welcome to Writers Not Writing. I'm very excited this week to have our guest, Erin M. Evans. Erin M. Evans is the author of the books of the Usurper series, including Empire of Exiles and the forthcoming Relics of Ruin, as well as the Brimstone Angels Saga. She's one of the hosts of the podcast Writing About Dragons and Shit, and a dungeon master on the Twitch actual play channel, Dungeon Scrawlers. Welcome, Erin. I'm very, very glad to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this will be a good one. So, as folks can see, we dress up in costume. I mean, we go all out for this. So, for the sake of the podcast, listeners, tell everybody about the costume you chose to wear.
Well, I have opted to depict one of my childhood favorites, Queen Frostine from Candyland, the 1984 version, not the more recent versions.
Yes.
You know. So this gown is opalescent crinoline with this sort of trademark frosting overskirt. I've got my glittering wig and my wand, my frosting wand.
Looks awesome. And I wanted to, be in the same vibe. And so I wanted to go Candyland as well, but I figured the character that I could best embody was Gloppy. And Gloppy, for folks who know the game, is clearly supposed to be the remains of a chocolate popsicle that has not done well in the sun, but really, let's be honest, at best he looks like a pile of mud. Could be worse, actually. Yeah. So I look like it was balloons and paper mache, and it's just this big pile of let's say chocolate. Let's hope
you've
chocolate.
Got a good shine. I think
some enamel spray on to make it shiny. So yes, I've got Gloppy going on here. So I've been very excited to talk to you. You've got a couple of books coming out this next year. Is it going to have to be 4 in a year?
It's two. It's two in a year.
2 this year, and then 2 to write.
2 next year.
So very, very busy. So tell everybody what you've got coming out soon.
Yeah, so the first book I have coming out is Relics of Ruin, which is the second book in my new series, my non-tie-in series, The Books of the Usurper. It, like the first book, Empire of Exiles, is a kind of murder mystery epic fantasy mashup. So it's a big secondary world, but at the end of the day, what we're doing is trying to solve a murder. And so in the case of Relics of Ruin, in both books, this centers on the Imperial Archives, which is sort of like if the Smithsonian were also a group home for people with mental health problems, because all of the archivists that work there, many of them are what's called a specialist, which they have an affinity for a worked material, which lets them kind of connect to that and sort of speak to it. So it's a very specific kind of magic system. And then the other people who work there kind of help, because this magic will sort of pull them into a state where they don't really know how to talk to people anymore. They only kind of talk to this material. And I was really trying to like embody what it feels like to have a panic disorder or an anxiety disorder, because that's my life. So that's kind of what I was aiming for. So once again, we're back in the Imperial Archives, and this time in the Chapel of the Skeleton Saints, which is a collection of the remains of the saints of these people, the Orizandi. When their sorcerers die, their flesh transmutes, and they collect the bones and decorate them. And so they've all been sort of put here. Some of the bones are replicas, because this whole book takes place in a world where a big catastrophe has basically forced the remnants of civilization into this Empire of Exiles. So one of the wooden skeletons is discovered to be a real skeleton. And so then they're going, who is this? How did they get here? Who stole this priceless relic from like one of the best protected facilities in the world? So it gets very tangly very quickly.
So is the victim the skeleton that they find, or is the victim the knowledge that they have lost a real precious relic, and that's what they're
I'm
trying to
like,
find?
you say that like there's only one victim.
Ah, okay.
No, it actually kicks off with the main character seeing a peddler get attacked in the road, and he's stabbed, and he says, you have to find her, you have to protect her. He basically gives kind of like loose directions to his house, and then he dies. So they go into the woods, they go into the house, and it sort of looks like a little shrine almost, and under the floor they find the wooden bones of the saint,
which are not supposed to be,
are not supposed to be there. They bring
it
back and they're like, who is this? Because we don't have a record of losing anybody. So then they find somebody dead is in the archives who's not supposed to be there, and then you have to figure out, who is that, and who's killed the peddler, and many more complications come up. And I love
that is a very cool premise. So, but that's just one of the two books. So what's the other?
Yes, the other one is I got approached to write another tie-in novel. So my background, I mostly am known for Forgotten Realms novels. That's what I did for most of my career. And so I was approached by a publisher who was doing books for the MMO RuneScape. So I got to write a RuneScape novel, which is called The Gift of Guthix, or Guthix. I have to admit, people have said it both ways. It's the name of a god in the setting. And so it's kind of historical. It doesn't take place in the current timeline. So I didn't mess up any of your plays, folks.
Yes.
It's about the founding of a kingdom called Asgarnia, and sort of the court intrigue, and there's a war that affects the Great Crusade, I think it's sometimes called. And so it is basically this story of sort of like the misunderstandings in friendship, and when it becomes complicated because you have a group that wants you to behave a certain way, and you are opposed to each other. But at the end of the day, it's about wizards and a giant frog demigod, and battles with not Vikings. And it's not based on Point Break.
Yeah. Nice. Excellent. And what was did you find there were limits in that you're creating a lore novel?
Oh yeah.
You can't alter the story, but is the time difference enough that it gave you the freedom you needed to do that?
Yeah, a little bit. Because, well, for one thing, I do like that about writing tie-in, that there's sort of parameters. You have these immovable pillars you have to tell the story between, and it's just kind of a fun exercise. But then on top of that, they said, there's not a lot written in this part.
Nice.
You're known for your world building. Can you come in and do some of that? Do some of the sort of everyday stuff, not the big events, but like, what is the, what did the culture of the Fremennik look like? How do they worship this god? And how come, we have things that say their worship looks like this when it shouldn't, it should look like this. Like, how do we explain all these bits? Yeah. And I love doing that part. That part's really fun. There were some things like I'm very used to, like I said, I wrote D&D novels, so I'm used to how magic works in D&D. So I come over to write this, and I'm writing about wizards, and you get into fight things, and it's like, oh, my options are basically, I send a blast of energy at one of these, like 1 to 5, level 1 to 5 of flavor 1 to 5, and that's about it. So there was one scene where I wrote where I had 2 wizards outside of a city that's being attacked. I'm like, I need them to get inside the wall. And it took me a couple of days to come up with a solution, because I was like, my brain kept going, oh, pass wall. Like, no, they don't have pass wall.
Other spells you could do. No.
Teleport. No, see, actually, at this time in the history, there is no teleport. And that's not how it works anyway. All right. And just going through like getting rid of the habit of going back to, the player's handbook.
Yeah, right.
It's like, I know
I've got all these spells to choose from. No, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
like,
interesting.
you got to be creative.
Yeah. Well, and I know that they're currently working on I've heard a rumor that they're working on one of these Star Wars prequels, but it's all the way back to the first Jedis. And I wonder if they'll run into that same limit where it's, the we're used to the world that we've been presented in the Star Wars universe where they already know how to do all these things, but the first person does not know that yet. And
Right.
so, that would be an interesting world to play in,
Can you imagine getting to wite the book where they
Oh my
like make the
gosh.
first lightsaber
Oh,
or
yeah.
something? That would be
Yeah.
very exciting.
Well, and is it a lightsaber? Or is it like they started
Right?
off pre-lightsabers with, sticks? Like what it,
Right?
So yeah,
You're
that would
just
be very.
fighting with your brains.
I mean, it seems natural. I think maybe if I were writing that, I would go, well, they probably started with swords and then
Yeah.
the techno. So are we going to get to see Jedi? Because otherwise, why would they go to lightsabers as the thing, right? So maybe we're going to get to see old-fashioned sword fighting, but with the Force, which would be very interesting. So yeah, how would that work? And then you've got the show as well. So you've got a lot
Yeah.
going on. So
Oh, yeah.
where are you at show-wise?
So I right now am DMing a campaign that's a spin-off of our original campaign. So it's sort of Westgate Irregulars, Fearful Symmetry. We just call it Fearful Symmetry most of the time. The impetus was kind of when we wrapped up the original campaign, there was a lot of sort of character story that just wasn't really room for, wasn't really picked up. And I had this kind of bonkers idea. And set it aside because I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this because I wasn't the DM in the original campaign. That was Eric Scott to be, who you've had on before.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, never mind. This won't happen because it was something that was very based on the characters. And the concept was that they are pulled into this world, which is a sort of, as I phrased it, it's a shadow cast by the prime material. So the greatest lie you tell about yourself creates a different version of you in this world. And so that's the first thing that they figure out because they meet my character in the original series when she was a child, was sort of dropped off with her father, who was a Rimiani, and the Forgotten Realms of Rimiani are the male witches of Rashomon, the masked witches, and they live in this cloistered space and they make magic items and they're not allowed to leave, and so she's not supposed to be there. So he basically like says, you never tell anyone you're a girl, your name is Ilya, and we're just gonna ride this out. And so Ilya is real in the world beyond the pale door because that's the biggest, like my character was a big liar, but that's the longest, most sustained lie.
Yeah.
And there were kind of complicated levels to it. And what I like about it is it creates this space for a character to so for a player to take their character and go, what is the thing that's in the way of me getting my happily ever after? And since the whole concept of the channel is like writers playing D&D, everybody has these really like nuanced characters that really have this opportunity to blossom when you put them in that kind of conflict, right? We had like Rhiannon Held you had on before, and she's got this character who's very like a little over concerned with what other people think about her. So her shadow was perfect. She was everything that she was ever told she had to be. She managed to fake her way through it. But in the process, like her character Artemisia was like, she doesn't seem happy. Like this isn't what I want actually. And I want to do what I feel like and not worry about other people. And so she had these great like scenes, and also they got to fight demons and stuff. So It's been a lot of fun. We're kind of heading towards the end. So it's on YouTube if you want to catch up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a really great experience. I never thought I was capable of DMing because like the first time I did it, I had tried to run it like it was like a novel everybody was going to go through, and I was like, you need to choose this thing.
That's precisely why I believe I cannot DM. I'm like, if I were running it, I would be like, no, your character doesn't do that. That doesn't fit my story.
Right, you need to do the. But the thing I realized from playing as much as I have, because I hadn't played a whole lot when I first tried, is like it's very much a case of like it's a different form, right? So you just have to sort of like think of setting up the obstacle to provoke a question, right? Like, and so what is the answer going to be? And so like at least one of the characters has basically said, okay, that's my lie, but I'm going to keep telling it because I'm telling it to make my life and my world better. And it's just such a nice thing that like, you have these spaces where they get to sort of explore and shift things. And it's still kind of all fitting together into a bigger narrative. Because that's the other fear, right? That they all go, no, we don't want to do this. We're going to go be pirates.
Right.
And you're like, I didn't plan for that.
from a writer perspective, and you're working with this whole group of writers, what a great exercise to say, what would a world be like where characters have to become conscious of their flaws? Like that's the tension. I mean, when I'm creating characters, I'm like, I want to know these characters so well, I recognize even the flaws they don't. And then to identify that and then say, and now this character is confronted with that. What is their thing that they and explore and all simultaneously? Everybody's having to realize their lie at the same time. That
So
would
they
be
they're kind of going one in sequence, right?
Yeah.
But the nice thing is that they've all got elements that kind of parallel each other. So like when you see someone else's lie, it forces you to think about like, how does this relate to me too?
Yeah.
And they've done a lovely job of that sort of shifting of who's the main character for this stretch, but also here's my thing that connects to this stretch, and they're wonderful players.
Well, and I think there would be this very natural human inclination to go, oh, I've learned what your lie is, and I've had to be open and transparent about what my lie is, but at least mine's not as bad as yours, or I'm ashamed because mine's worse than yours. And so how do they, rank their own faults would be interesting,
Yes, that has come up. And just so we don't end up talking solely about this game, I'll point people again to Dungeon Scrawlers.
Yes, check that out. That sounds great. So, but this is not a show about process. This could easily, I mean, this is what writers do, right? Right away, we're like, ooh, we're talking about people. How could these characters, right? But show about procrastination. So what has been pulling you away from all of this work in terms of pop culture lately?
I have been playing this video game. So for ages, I never put games on my laptop. Then I got COVID and I was stuck in bed and I was like, okay, I'm gonna find something I can play. So I downloaded Steam, and I got this game called Book of Hours, by a company called Weather Factory, where you are like a librarian in this creepy abandoned library, that has like cultish connections. They have another game called Cultist Simulator, which I haven't played, but they're very heavily entangled. So you get these rooms open and you find books and you open the books and you learn things from them, and it's all like about stacking cards, really. Yeah, so it'll be like you learn the lesson of the Magaffine mysteries, right? And so then you have to find like an element of your soul that will boost that to combine it so you have higher levels so that you can read harder books. So I really like games. Like in fiction, I like a narrative that sort of isn't on rails. I like going into a book and not knowing what is going on. I love piecing things together and not sort of not spotting it. For video games, I'm a big fan of I know when I'm right.
Yeah, I know how this mechanic works, right?
I will tell you, like, this is a little bit off topic, but I'm kind of known for going way off topic, but the game Obra Dinn, The Return of the Obra Dinn. Have you ever played this?
No.
Oh my God. Okay. So this is one of those games you can basically play once and then you just have to tell everybody else to play it. So you play as an insurance adjuster in the 1800s, and this ship has washed up, it disappeared, and then it washed up and everybody's dead. So you climb on the boat and you have this, here's the twist, you have this weird pocket watch that lets you go back in time and see the moment of any corpse's death. And you have to figure out who everybody is, how did they die, and it's like a really elaborate logic puzzle, fundamentally. And it gets weird. It gets real weird. Like, this was not just a storm. And it is the most satisfying game I've ever played. That is the kind of game
okay, so
I love
have
so
to put a link. You'll have to give me. I'll have to put a link in the show because this sounds fascinating. Is that available on any system or is it on Steam?
I played it on Switch. It's definitely on Steam. I'm pretty sure it's on Xbox too, and that's all I've got. So, but I think it's on everything. Yeah, The Return of the Obra Dinn. I want this guy. It was like one guy made it, and I really want him to make a sequel because nothing has
What a trip.
Just so much joy is that. I love that game
Yeah.
so much.
Oh, so on. Am not as big a gamer as my son. He is like, and when I can finally share a cool game with him, I'm going to be the coolest dad. Like, I'm always following him where he's like, okay, these are the top 10 games of last year. And I'm like, I have time for one of those. And so, yes, this sounds,
how do they play them so fast?
Yeah.
Like one of my son's favorite games is Fire Emblem at Three Houses, and I tried to play this, and it's lovely, but oh my god, it takes so long to play. And he's gone through like 3 playthroughs. I'm like, your screen time allowance is not this big. What are you doing differently?
It's a combination of they go so much faster. Like I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3. I stop and I check every single barrel.
Oh, that's true.
And everything else. I'm looking. And Noah's like, no, I beat it in still 30 hours or whatever. And I'm like, plus he can rack up 30 hours. And I'm like, where are you finding these 30 hours? He's a college student. He's doing well in school. I'm like, are you sure you're doing well in school? He's like, yeah. And I also managed to find 30 hours to knock out in this game. I'm like, man, yeah, but they don't have children. So
that's true. That is true.
That's, I think, the big difference is all the responsibilities there too. So what has been pulling you away from your work in terms of news lately?
Oh, okay. So the news rabbit hole that I keep falling down. So I mentioned I had COVID, which sucks. I seem to be, I am like fully vaxxed as soon as it's available. And in my house, I'm the one that keeps getting sick. And I'm so mad about it. So I have been having sort of long-term symptoms like off this one.
My
so
partner
I've been having
had some, it lasted for a while.
I am really hoping that I am fortunate enough to have the kind of, you have long COVID for a couple of weeks, because it is getting a little bit better.
It did end for her. So that is the good news. It's not like this is for the rest of your life,
Right. That because it's very scary, right?
It is.
So I am not good at resting. I'm getting better. I'm getting better at resting because it's very necessary. But I also find myself kind of looking at different research and different sort of suggested, like, that might be helpful to try this vitamin or this medication, or, there's this study, partly just because I like reminding myself that this is something people are working on.
Right.
And partly, if it turns out that, like, for example, there's a lot of evidence that says for certain, clusters of symptoms, taking a daily antihistamine is helpful.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Which I'm already like so allergic to dust that I just don't go where the house isn't clean. So it's probably better for me to take a Zyrtec every day anyway. But
that's interesting. Antihistamine, that's not what I would have thought of. Like, I know that there's some speculation that it has to do with constriction of blood vessels, and so I expect there will be debates about, do you do blood thinners? Do you not do blood thinners? But I never would have thought of antihistamine. That's interesting.
Yeah, I saw something that referenced like a pair of women who were healthcare workers who noticed, who were taking it regularly for allergy reasons, and noticed that their symptoms went away. And so, you see a lot of people combining like a kind of nasal allergy and like Pepcid, because it's an antihistamine too. So we'll see. And then,
as far as I know, I've managed to avoid it so far. Same thing. They come out with a vaccine, I'm zipping in, but my partner's had it, my son's had it, and he had unsymptomatic COVID twice. The only reason he even knew he had it was, you should get tested because you've been in this place with this, and he had unsymptomatic COVID, but then he did have long COVID symptoms after.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's frustrating.
Right? Well, and that's one of those things
that I
don't think people need to think about. You might not feel like you've had COVID. You could still end up with long COVID symptoms. So get your shots, people. Get your mask. But that's that. Well, I'm glad. So are you already feeling that some of those long symptoms are going away?
I think so. The other thing, which is sort of Jason is one of the people on the Dungeon Scholars Discord, is actually he was a psychology researcher, and he's writing a book about burnout, and he specifically had a chapter that was about kind of like fatigue. So I got to read his chapter, Dr. Ben Cyril, and he had really good advice, right? So I was talking about things like radical rest, and so you do something and then you need to go lay down for 10 minutes. So I mentioned at the beginning that like I have an anxiety disorder. So most of my life I've been told you should meditate. And I'm like, I really don't like doing this, but I have learned to like it. I've learned to do it because it's the thing I can do that makes me like close my eyes and not try and like fiddle with a problem for 10 minutes.
Well, I was thinking about, you were talking about reading the research, and there's that balance of like, this helps me calm down because I know that people are working on this, and also to what extent is this increasing my anxiety? Like that,
right?
'cause as somebody who deals with anxiety myself, like, when I say deals with anxiety, not always well, and so like,
right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that is reading the research can be great when you get the answers you want, but if it's real research, you might not always.
Right. Especially when it's one where it's like you're reading along and then it's like bomb. You're like, oh, I was not ready for that one.
Yep. Oh, yeah, that's so what about hobbies when you're not writing and you're not down with COVID? What has been keeping you away from your work lately?
Man, when I was thinking about, what I would talk about of this show, this was when I was like, I work and I watch my kids and I like do house stuff and like, do I have hobbies? But aside from the video games, the other thing that I've been doing lately, because also, I've found that it's gotten a lot better, but staring at a screen really like, gives me that sort of fatigue headache, like I can't anymore, and so I really got to save that for like the writing time. So I have picked up embroidery again, because the other thing I love reading, obviously, I really love audiobooks because then I can do the aforementioned house and children things. If it's not a thing I have to listen, right, but just have to be present, I can listen to an audiobook at the same time. But I am, like I said, I'm bad at resting. I'm bad at slowing down. And so a fidget, right? So I can't listen to an audiobook and not do something else unless the other thing I'm doing is trying to fall asleep. So it's like, okay, I just want to wind down. Normally I'll listen to an audiobook and do like a little color app or something, but I'm off screen. So I've picked up embroidery because especially if it's like fairly simple stitches, it's something where I don't have to sort of think as hard about it, and I can just kind of go, but it's something for my hands to do because otherwise.
So big projects or small stuff or
little. I'm working on this little kit that I bought that's like kind of stylized waves with different patterns on them, and I'm gonna stitch what's the saying? A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor on top of it. So it's it's well on its way to being done, which is always the thing with picking up new projects. You're like, is this
that's a great one. My dad does cross stitch and started off with the little stuff and then moved on to huge, elaborate, fantastic pieces that are these pieces of art that now they decorate their home with these. They'll end up going, the theme for this room is all going to be around this piece that my dad.
Nice.
It's really cool, and so I should look into that too, because I am a huge audiobook fan, and finding something else to do that is that right balance of it keeps me occupied, but it doesn't take me away from the book, because I do want to hear the book. And so yard work and gardening are great in the right season.
Laundry, dishes,
yes,
but
exactly.
They get done, right?
But something like that would be really good for me. I should see if I've got those skills. I don't know that. I went through a painting phase. I could paint while I do it. That worked, but
puzzles are good.
Yes, puzzles are good. So part of the point of the show is I want to help readers get to know you as a person, so that when they're reading your work, they're going, oh yeah, I know her. It was cool to get to hang out with Erin M. Evans on this show. I'm going to check out her books. So one of these Rorschach kind of things is the way we create characters in D&D. So if you yourself were the character, not not the character you choose to play, who might be very different from you, but if you were a D&D character, who would be your race? What would be your race and class?
So I feel like there's an answer that I go to first because of the kind of thing I write, which is actually not what I think most people will guess. The first thing I thought of was a dragonborn cleric. My Brimstone Angels saga is about a tiefling warlock, but she is culturally dragonborn because she's been adopted by a dragonborn. And so the last couple books are about the dragonborn kingdom in Forgotten Realms and how they basically get a god because they are as atheistic as you can be in the Forgotten Realms, where gods literally come down and say, yo, what's up? They're just like, no, that's a big monster that's asking you to make a deal you can't get out of. Hard pass. But this god comes in and is basically like, you guys are in a lot of trouble and I want to help you. And so this one character has to kind of become his cleric and broker this deal. So the god is sort of like a mercenary that they do a thing with. And one of my favorite characters I've ever played was a dragonborn cleric. But she was like 14 and did not do clericing like anybody expected. At one point, somebody accused her of proselytizing, and she was like, no, you can't have him. He's our god. You're not allowed.
The worst kind of evangelical.
Right. Just absolutely not interested in that. I did not take proficiency in religion for her. So that's like my heart goes there. But I think that if it's me, like real talk, the thing I love the most in D&D, my power fantasy in D&D is everybody has to listen to me. I always end up making a high charisma character. That's like the thing I want the most. So I feel like that's either like bard or warlock. And then man, I want to, part of me's like, well, of course I pick a human, but let's go a little fun. I'll be a half elf bard. I think that would be.
And what does, so I like half elf. What does that reveal about you as a person?
Ooh, that's a good question. My ears are slightly pointed. No. I think there's so half elves are interesting because it depends a lot on the setting, how they get handled, right?
Yeah.
But it is the case that I'm sure a lot of people, I often feel like when I'm talking, I am 15% off of the normal expected, right? That frequently I go into like one of the silly examples is it's very popular now to sort of frame your books with what tropes are in them, and I have no ability to understand tropes. Like I do them sometimes by accident, but I also know like Brimstone Angels has a TV tropes page and it is full of this trope. Well, but not really, right? Yeah. It's like it's all just a little off. So okay, half elf is just a little off a human.
Yeah.
But not so like completely encompassed by a different vibe. Like I would feel like I was lying if I said I was a tiefling, because there's definitely something more to tieflingness than that. So I think that I'm just a little weird.
Okay, so
that doesn't necessarily show on the surface.
So you're a half elf bard or a half elf wizard, and you are attacked by 3 level 1 goblins walking through the woods. What do you do?
Fast talk of. I love a charisma check. I will try to persuade or deceive or intimidate anything I can, because that is the thing I get the most joy out of.
Yes.
So I would tell those goblins, so they attack me, and I would tell them that I would try and spin it, right? I would tell them that like they're in the wrong spot. There's a better guy to attack down the road. Like, and actually now you owe me a fee because I told you where the better spot was, and just hopefully talk circles around them.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing because different DMs handle that differently, and I'm so here for it. Like some of them are like, okay, weirdo, sure, you rolled really high.
I'm giving you money. Yeah, I love that. Oh, that is great. Okay, well, we're gonna go to our break, and when we come back, I'm gonna ask you what you've been daydreaming about lately.
Yeah.
Special announcement time. NotAPipePublishing has always been committed to helping authors and readers find one another. Well, the show, which is all about helping readers get to know writers, just hit a milestone: 10,000 views on YouTube. So to celebrate, Instead of charging authors to advertise their books on the show, I'm going to run your ads for free throughout 2024. If you want to make a 30 to 60-second video about your book, let folks know what it's about and where to find it, and don't forget your name and the title. I'll run 1 or 2 of those in our ad spot each week. Just send an MP4 file to the NotAPipe email address in the show notes. Let's fix up some readers and authors into reader relationships. 2024. More readers, more writers, more books.
Hi, my name is Marcella Stepper-Darte, and my debut novel, The Hand of Fate, by Marcella Stepper-Darte, is an epic fantasy. The main character, Mira, is a foster kid who takes care of younger children, and soon she realizes she has to tap into powers she never knew she had so she can protect those she loves. This is loosely based on Norse mythology and started out with me asking the question, what if? The Hand of Fate is book 1 of a trilogy. Book 2 will be The Hand of Ice, and book 3, The Hand of Fire. Please go to my website, marcellastepperdarte.com, to follow the links to Amazon so you can order your copy of The Hand of Fate by Marcella Stepper-Darte.
Welcome back. I'm here with Erin M. Evans. And Erin, what have you been daydreaming about lately?
So I was thinking, like, what do I fit in here? And the thing that I think the thing I come back to that's kind of interesting, at least, that isn't just like, you know, oh, my book does really well,
Right.
is gene therapy. So my son, younger son, has a monogenetic disorder called STXBP1 encephalopathy. So just as a quick rundown, STXBP1 is a gene that creates something called syntaxin binding protein. Syntaxin is a neurotransmitter that basically makes the synapses of your neurons close so that they can pass messages. And so if you have a mistake in this gene, you might not produce syntaxin binding protein, which means there's nothing to grab that syntaxin. Or you might make, I've always described it as like for my son, the way this works is you take that gene, you look at one nucleotide, and in that one place, instead of having a G, he has an A. That's it.
Yeah, it's
That's
that
it.
small. It's
right.
It's a molecule.
Right. Yeah. It's just tiny. And because of that, the grabber claw of his syntaxin binding protein isn't polarized properly. So it's kind of floppy. And so he has what's called a missense mutation, which means he makes some amount of syntaxin binding protein. But, you know, for other kids who have a nonsense and they make none, this disorder has a huge range of expressions. So we went to a family conference this summer, and I met kids and adults, right, who have to get around using a wheelchair, who have to be fed through tubes. There's a lot of difficulty in getting verbal skills. So my son's 8. He says, yeah, pretty readily now. And that's exciting.
Yeah.
Right. He's got, it's frustrating for him because he's got a lot of receptive language. He understands what people are saying to him, but he can't produce it because he can't send the signal to his mouth to make the shape. Right. And we found, you know, the more he practices something, the easier it is to make that connection. But, you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of trouble.
Oh my gosh,
and
yeah.
one thing that it was really, really heartening going to this conference was just the state of research into gene therapies.
Yeah.
You know, lots of different things. You hear about CRISPR, you hear AAV therapy, which is sort of sending in a virus, and seeing that, you know, for some of these, they're in mouse studies, and they're taking adult mice and restoring full function. It's an epilepsy, so that's the main symptom everybody has. And it can be really hard for some kid to treat. Yeah.
I'm epileptic as well. I know
Oh
about
yeah.
epilepsy, yeah.
So I'm sure too that you've gone through like the medication stuff is really tricky because it's gotta like hit just right. You know, we talked to someone who had just had a vagal nerve stimulator put in to her son because he would have drop seizures.
Yep.
And so it's something where, you know, we're really fortunate that my son's responsive to just Keppra, right? And that it doesn't make him furiously angry because that's one of the fun side
I have a friend who's epileptic and just got off Keppra because it was doing that very same thing.
Right? It's
I don't know why, but I am enraged all the time. I have to.
they
Like,
warned us. They were like, just beware, right? Especially because he has such trouble communicating. So like, there's all this research and there's all this progress, and I think it's less common now. But I know there was a time, especially when my son was first diagnosed, and people would talk about gene therapy, and they'd all go, "Oh, Gattaca, we can't have that." And it's, to me, it's really it's I find it very fortunate to see there are a lot of researchers who are, that it's not the discourse on social media, and that there is this understanding of like ethics is important.
Right.
But that answer isn't just take it away.
Yeah.
Because these are the people it helps, is like, it's one tiny error. It's one little, it is shocking to think about how many things have to go perfectly right to have a human being anyway, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, so like, it's just really cool to think about, we live in a place and a time where that's possible. And like, my son's disorder wasn't even identified until like 2007.
Yeah.
And it's one of the, for epilepsies of genetic origin, it's a rather common one, even though it is still a really rare disease. And so it's a really interesting one. And I think it's a really cool area of study. And I'm looking forward to what they find next.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think, my impression, and you know better than I would, is that the real challenge they're working on is, now we can identify what that G to A is, right? But
Yeah.
what's the delivery mechanism? How can we get the virus into every cell to fix it? Like, to make that, little change.
And for STXBP1 mutations, like, the important cells are in your brain, which means you have to get something through that blood-brain barrier.
Right.
So you have to figure out how the proteins fold. And then there's also this factor of, for certain kinds of therapy, like, it's going to be a virus, it's going to put a load on your immune system. How much can you reasonably give someone before you're causing more problems?
And again, I could be wrong here, but this is my understanding, is brain cells are not continuously being created. So in with some other kind of therapy, you could go, okay, well, we can't fix this cell, but we can fix the progeny of that cell.
Yeah.
But with brain cells, I can imagine that it's got to be a different delivery.
I feel like I read something that they found that isn't the case, but maybe it's something. I'm not sure though. That's because I have heard that, but then I also have this feeling that I read something where they're like, actually, oh my God, you keep making them.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's challenging.
That's the question. Does, and the structure of the brain is so intensely complex too, that if you were only changing the new ones, do the previous ones that retain that characteristic still cause? So yeah, it's a very exciting time to be learning how is this going to be dealt with. But it also has to be incredibly frustrating to know we're making these incredible leaps, and yet it's got to feel too slow. Right.
Right. Exactly. Like, when he got diagnosed, they said, real talk, we are maybe like 10 years from a cure for this, which is like amazing on the one hand, for something that people, to even 10 years earlier, you'd just be like, something's wrong with your child and we don't know what.
We don't know what,
but at the same time, right? But it's the kind of thing when you have a kid with a diagnosis like that, you kind of do every day as it comes. I feel like for him, it's what's the next thing we're going to work on, and he's still building skills, which is great. He's adorable and sweet and very kind, and
well, and I'll bet you that
an amazing sleeper. I just want to call that one out, because my first one did not sleep.
I can imagine that first consistent was pretty life-changing for everyone in the family.
Yeah, he's when he does it, he's so pleased with himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great.
Oh, that's great. Well, that is exciting. And now that I know about that condition, I'll be keeping an eye out too. Like, hey, I know somebody who's, waiting on this to get, that big breakthrough news announcement. That will be very cool.
That would be very exciting.
So what's one thing that you want listeners to know about that's happening career-wise, in the immediate future?
Well, I talked about my books. I do want you to know about my books.
Yes. They'll be in the show notes. So people now, as you're listening, go down into the show notes on whatever app you're on, click on the link, get them immediately.
And like, I love this. I love getting to write my own stuff and just be as absolutely full weird as I loved writing Forgotten Realms, but there is a constraint there, right? Someone else
Right.
has built most of the world. So you're kind of like growing things in all the
Right.
cracks. And this one is just like, would you like to see what happens when I told them the faucet on full?
Yeah.
And then they tell me to turn it back a little bit because that's too much information. But it'll keep coming. So anyway, so yes, books. The other thing I thought of is we're doing this thing on the Discord for Dungeon Scrawlers, which I give you a link to too, because it's so, you know, we welcome anybody who can come and be chill. But we started doing this really fun thing, PowerPoint party. So this is a thing I had heard of people doing. Like, you know, you get to a point in your life and most of us stop having to make PowerPoints.
Right.
But
I had to make one today. I am not at that point.
You're not
my
that,
job requires
right?
it. Yeah.
That's right. There are some jobs where it's necessary,
Yes.
but so you just make a PowerPoint about something fun, right? The kind of assignment that kids sometimes get that is sort of like learn to use PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Tell me about a thing. And so, you know, we were kind of joking about it and then we decided to do it. So we had our first one. And we had a presentation about cholera and Dr. John Snow and the blah blah street pump. I can't remember the name. That was very interesting. We had a presentation that was about how Godzilla's costume design reflects the Japanese relationship with the American military. We had one. The guy I mentioned before, who's writing the Burnout book, did a presentation about sort of the difference between an obstacle and a hindrance, and I forgot the other thing, in both fiction and in life, or gaming. And then I did one. I read this book that I loved so much, which was called Persians by Llewellyn-Smith, and it's a really easily digestible and very information filled book about the Achaemenid dynasty. So I did a presentation that was royal women of the Achaemenid dynasty ranked by how afraid I would be to wreck their coffee order.
Yes.
So awesome. It was like, it was so much fun. So we're going to do another one. The date is not yet determined, but we're getting signups for new presentations. I'm trying to decide if I want to do one. I kind of want to watch one this month, but
that's very cool. That sounds great. And so when people are doing these, are they, you know, doing a like an oral presentation because it's Discord?
So we use there's like a video chat area, like a voice chat area, and you can screen share. So we screen share, you go through the slides and you sort of you talk about what you're showing, right? So it's not just like read the slide, everybody. But it's really fun. And you know, there's so many people in our group, in our Discord, in our group here that have really interesting backgrounds and really interesting special interests. And so I highly anticipate this will be a very active and entertaining feature.
That is very cool. I am going that. I mean, I would eat that up. Like, that's the kind of, hey, here's an expert just willing to share something they find fascinating. Like, I love that. So yeah, that there was a podcast that I will not name because I did not enjoy it and I'm not going to badmouth them, but they kind of promoted it on those grounds. Like, hey, this is just going to be a show about really fascinating experts. And then it ended up being, you know, 2 minutes of genuinely really interesting information and then a lot of just joking around that wasn't particularly funny. And I was really disappointed. I was like, no, I want that other podcast that I was envisioning when it's exactly what you're describing. Just here's a cool, interesting presentation about something you didn't know about. Like, I would be all over that. So another thing we do on the show is have a weekly poll. And sometimes I even remember to post them. Sometimes I don't. What would be your kind of question for the world?
So I had a question, and I actually think I would rather change what I suggested because it was so contentious. And I will just say that it was it came out on the Discord that there is a division between the UK and the US about whether a frown involves your mouth.
Yes, I thought this was a great one. I think that's
maybe we should keep it. I've just noticed that when I ask people this, they get very angry.
Oh, see, my immediate reaction, this is so funny. The first time I heard about this, my first reaction was, well, I need to frown now to try and figure it out. And so you're like feeling your own face muscles
Right.
going, well, do I? Do I?
The thing I
I
find
think
the
it is
funniest,
mostly in my forehead now that I think about it.
right?
But you know, that it's an interesting question.
Right, because I feel like but this also led into like, well, what's a scowl then, and what's a
Right?
glower? And it's like, well, a scowl is like a a a frown that's more eyebrow. This was basically what we came down to, is that fundamentally it hinges on who do you think the main actor is? Is it the mouth or the eyebrows?
Mm.
But what I find really funny is people who say a frown is in your eyebrows. When you say, but what about like your mouth or something? They're like, I don't do this. And
Right.
it's like
Yes, that's right.
nobody actually
Nobody
said
does.
weird clown mouth.
Right.
Right? Like, but you know, when you actually, it's hard to frown because I'm laughing so hard. Like when you actually frown, like your mouth is doing something.
Purse your lips. Yeah, you can.
Right? You purse your lips, and like, you know, I have definitely been so sad that like, you know,
Oh,
it
yeah.
drags down, right? That
But
we've
that for
all
me is
felt
more
that.
sob. Like that's a sob mouth. Like you know. Whereas I'm thinking like I wonder if the distinction between, for me, maybe this is just me, is between a frown and a scowl is not so much what my face is doing, which might be identical. It's the direction.
Yeah,
You
directionality
know, a
is important.
frown is like, I am confused. This is going
Yeah.
inwards. And then a scowl is outwards. And it probably is, now that I feel the muscles, the exact same expression. But a scowl is directed at you and a frown is directed at me.
Yup. But
Uh,
it was a question I found surprising because I had never heard. I was raised in a mouth frowning household. I'd never heard this concept that the frown is in the eyebrows, and
yeah.
then
No,
you know,
I had,
people,
until I came across
right?
the question, I had never thought about that. I was like, oh, frown, that is, and I think even in my own writing, like I
Right?
presumed, oh, people frown with their mouths. And once I thought about it, I was like, no, even my characters are not. That is not what they're actually doing. They are frowning with their eyebrows. So
Right.
yeah,
Or
that's
like it's interesting. I just find it really, really interesting because it also evokes a very passionate response in people. Like,
yeah, which is also interesting. Why, like, we're touching
right?
on something deeply
Like
held.
this is like a fundamental thing that you are breaking. Stop it.
Don't you dare take my mouth frown away from me and move it to
Right.
my eyebrows. Shame on you.
Oh,
That is interesting. So what
I
has
think
been
this
in
was
what, you know, as in an effort to not make this show homework for anybody, I don't ask about what you have been reading. I ask about
great.
what you're looking forward to reading. So what's a book that's on your TBR pile that you're looking forward to?
Oh, so the one that pops into my mind is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. This is a book I did start as an audiobook, but I found I really wanted to like linger on the
Mm,
writing. And so I bought a copy because I just like I just felt like I was missing out
yeah.
by listening to it. But it's there's something about like I have this project going with my older son where this summer we made like my library does a bingo. Well, this was the Seattle library. We're in the suburbs, but they did like a bingo board. So read a book with a song, read a book
Oh,
by an
clever.
author of color,
So it's
right?
not
But
this particular book. It's in this
no, yeah.
category, and then you try and that's cool.
But when I was growing up and you had summer reading programs, it was like do 5 books, get a pencil,
Right.
do 5 books, and they don't do that anymore. It's like do all of it and get it entered into a drawing for a gift card. And I was like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
So here's what we're gonna do. So he got the bingo board. I also got the adult bingo board, and I wrote down 25 books from my TBR list. And so if we both get a bingo, there's like a list of things that we can go do together.
Yeah.
Like
Well, that's
there's a
great.
cat cafe the next town over. We can go to the cat cafe. And so I have to catch up. So I have books that are sort of like a little bit obligation to
Yeah,
read,
yeah.
which
Now,
like, you know, it's one
can
of
a
those
single
things.
book count for two, or do you have to go, okay, no, I cannot
No.
have, you know, I can't read Octavia Butler and go, I've read a book by
So
a woman of
right,
color.
he's got that version. I just wrote books that I have on my
Yeah.
list. right? Because it's just like I had too many books to read to say I'm also going to add another 25.
Yeah.
And so of course I went through and I read the ones I was most excited about in the beginning. And then now it's getting into stuff where I'm like excited, but I also know it's going to be work.
Yeah.
I'm like halfway through this book, this nonfiction book called Talking to Virgil by T.P. Wiseman. And it's this classicist just like wrote these essays because he wanted to. And he's a very delightful writer. But at the same time, like reading academic stuff takes a lot more brain than reading like, you know, what was one of the ones I read early was the Late Mrs. Willoughby, which is like Jane Austen murder mystery
Yeah. Just
from Claudia
fun.
Gray.
Yeah.
Right? Totally different, right? So I'm getting down to the stuff that's like researchy books.
Yeah. Well,
That I want to
I've done
read.
that same thing that you've done where I get the audiobook and then I go, no, I need to purchase this on paper. For me, it's because this is one I need to highlight in,
Oh, yes.
like so
Oh,
that I
yes.
can understand what it is, so that I can be more actively reading. And so, and the first few times I did that, I was like, oh, I've made a terrible, poor financial decision. And then I was like, you know what? I'm a writer supporting a writer by buying their book twice. I don't feel bad about that at
Yeah.
all. Good.
Yeah.
You know, they made 2 sales with me. Good. They deserve it, you know. Yeah, there are a handful of those books where I had to go, I need to hold this in my hands. I need to highlight in this book. So I want to add a new segment to our show. I am recognizing that the algorithm, especially on YouTube, is designed around outrage. And there's this inclination, there's this temptation, I think, for those of us who need to promote ourselves, who need to say to people, you know, get my book, to you know, to lean into that and go, okay, I'm going to say this just awful thing, to the point where like I'll hear people and I'll go, does this person actually believe this awful thing, or are they just saying it for attention? And you know, and I'm honestly not sure sometimes. I'm like, did this person really just say that they hold this belief? Oh no, maybe they're, you know, wanting a Fox News show. Like, and so, you know, that kind of tension. And so instead, we're gonna just play with that and say, what is our absolute hot take within the outrage machine that is going to get us a ton of attention. So what is your opinion that you're going to go out there on a limb, put this on video? I mean, people will know you said this thing, and then they're going to go, oh my gosh, half of us love you and half of us hate you, and we all have to buy your book. So what is your thing that's going to generate all that outrage?
If you don't offer biscuits as a bread option, you should not be calling yourself a breakfast place.
Yeah,
it is absurd to me that it is so hard to find biscuits in Seattle. You have to go to like, I know of 2 places that have biscuits that are good, and one of them is like, that's all they do. It's a stand-up place. There's a huge line, and that's what everybody says to me. Oh, you should go to Biscuit Bitch. I'm like, yes, they're great. However, I should be able to just order my scrambled eggs and bacon and be asked, do I want a biscuit with that?
Yeah. So McDonald's did this ad campaign. I don't know if this is still even a thing that exists, but for a period, they were like, we're going to be the breakfast all day place. And the only thing I like at McDonald's, otherwise I will avoid McDonald's like the plague. I'm like, this is a place that is just, you know, but I love their not the biscuit, bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit. And during this time, they were like, oh yeah, we got breakfast all day, but half the locations will have the biscuits all day, and the other half will have the McGriddle all day, which means you're getting egg and bacon on a sweet waffle concoction that is, you know, that is the and
you don't know before you go.
And you don't know. You show up at a McDonald's and they're like, sorry, it's after 10 o'clock and all we have is McGriddles. And I'm like, then you do not have breakfast, because I totally agree with you. If there are no biscuits, it is no longer breakfast all day. It has ceased to be breakfast all day. You have no biscuits. Yes, I completely agree. Yes,
travesty.
Yes, we have now said that thing. That is on the record. If people disagree with us, they should buy our book.
You know what? People are allowed to be mad. Yeah.
Yep, be mad.
Buy my book and burn it if you want. Still bought it.
I completely agree. Okay. So, where can folks find you online so they can, you know, be outraged and go buy your books?
So I am on Bluesky and nominally on Twitter at Erin M Evans. That is also my website, erinmevans.com. I am the Discord that we've mentioned several times. I am active on that. Those are all good places to find me. I have a Facebook page for my author stuff, which I use sometimes, but I find it is very demanding that I do ads and things, so I tend to ignore it.
Yeah.
I
Well,
also have an Instagram, but I have to say I'm really bad. That one's all the ironies. I have to admit, I am so bad at taking photos. I set out this year to like take a photo every year, whether it was good or bad. And then I had a post-COVID crash. So I didn't finish doing that. I'm trying to figure out how to use Instagram, guys. I'll take all tips.
Well, and this is, I mean, I went to a great session at a writing conference, and one of the big things was like, don't try and do there are distinct skill sets for each one of these, platforms, and don't try and do them all. You will drive yourself insane. Some people can do a TikTok video. I look ridiculous. Like that is not
I'm too old for TikToks.
Yeah. And then, some people are
whatever
great
that means. I'm just going to go with it.
Yeah.
Too old for TikToks.
So yeah, good for you for knowing your strengths. You do not have to be a photographer and an author and a podcaster, and you've got enough going. So who else is somebody you would recommend having as a guest on the show?
Wait, I did forget one other thing. I do another show on twitch.tv/dungeon scrawlers, which is called Concentration Check. And it is basically a co-writing show. So every Monday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific, I do Concentration Check, and we do Pomodoro sprints.
So how do you what does that look like for the viewer?
They watch me write.
But someone else. And they see what you're writing?
So they don't. They just watch me make it. It's just me typing. It's like this. Except also I make faces sometimes. I'll be like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny because it was a thing. It was a very simple suggestion when we were talking about what kind of shows to add to our schedule. Because one of the limitations is like, if you are a full-time writer, right? You've got books to write. And so adding more shows, more like D&D shows, right? This is another thing you have to make. And so this was like, I could write and do a show at the same time. So, we'll talk about, we'll usually, because Pomodoro sprints is 25 minutes of working, 5 minutes of break. And then after you do 4 rounds, you do a long break. And so we'll come up with a topic about creativity or writing or, sometimes some silly thing that people are interested in and sort of chat. I do have a co-host sort of Yang Yang Wang, who's one of the Dungeon Scholars folks, and he's sort of running the tech, and so he talks, but he won't turn his camera on. I keep giving him trouble about it, but he won't. And then I've had a guest on one now and again, but it's one of those things where we get so into the rhythm of it that I forget that I can keep doing that.
So what is what is it? I don't want to like ask too invasive a question, but I mean, is there an audience? Like, are folks?
Yeah. We usually get like about. I mean, it's not huge. It's like 20 people.
That's awesome.
And then the thing that surprised me to realize is that people will watch the VODs
later,
right? Because there is something. It's like that body doubling thing. It's like I'm not the only one doing this.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe it's not about the chatting. It's about making that space carved out and feeling like someone is there with you, because I find that too. Like sometimes it is very helpful to co-work because there's this feeling of like, like we're both doing the same thing and I don't want to stop doing that because I've agreed here. And I don't know if it's quite got that feeling for people, but I'm glad it's
I can totally imagine that. We do a fundraiser each year for the Alzheimer's Association where we write from dusk till dawn. We actually do it twice. We do it on the shortest day of the year. We do it the longest day of the year. And we'll just have everybody who agrees to be on the team will be in the Zoom room. So you literally just have the faces of people who are typing as you are trying to do this thing, which on the longest day of the year is a slog. Like that is hard to write from dawn till dusk. But it ends up being really productive. And then we raise money for, everybody's working on their own.
That's awesome.
But we raise money for the Alzheimer's Association. Yeah. But I have thought about doing a thing. So I've got this funky, keyboard that looks like an old school typewriter. And I've thought about setting up the camera just of the keyboard and my fingers. And then doing
That would be kind
basically
of
an
fun.
ASMR video. Like, hey, do you like
Yeah.
the sound of a weird keyboard?
I bet you'd get people. I bet you'd get people watching
People
it.
might, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know that again, like you said, it's the like, would I do it regularly enough that it would be of any value? But I could do it as a YouTube show and just, archive them.
Yeah.
Hey, you want another episode of me just typing? We're now up to episode 4. Like, yeah, that would be, but that is very cool. So it's just folks watching you do those. That's genius. That's brilliant.
Yep.
Double
We do
the
like
content.
I make at one point, we'll do things on the breaks, like talk about what people are working on. I used to give them scavenger hunts so they'd get up out of their chair, but I kind of just realized we're all grown-ups. Get out of your chair if you want to get out of your chair. And it was hard to think of. And then it's like they don't have a way to show me what they found or anything.
Right.
So then we do hand stretches is the other thing.
Yeah.
From like,
oh, that's great. I should join in sometime. That would be very fun. Yeah. But the challenge for me is, it would be good for me because it would discipline when I'm doing that writing, because otherwise I'm like, oh, sometimes I'm writing on this time of the day, and sometimes I write, and so that would force me also to be writing at a more regular pace too. So that would be good. We'll put a link to that as well, so folks can check that out if they would like to join in. I think that's great. So who else would you recommend me have on this show?
Okay, so 2 people that I love talking about writing with, Shauna Germain, who is one of the co-owners of Monty Cook Games and also a very prolific short fiction writer. She's kind of done everything, and she has such wonderful insights about sort of like language and character emotions. And since you're not going to talk about any of that,
right?
She also does
she also does
really fun
somebody's
things.
Not asking me about these things.
I also feel like she's got just like, I don't know, she's always got some cool new projects, new hobbies she's trying, which makes me, makes me want to try stuff. But she's delightful. I would also say my co-host on Writing About Dragons and Shit, B. Dave Walters, who writes it's primarily screenplays and like TTRPG stuff, but also comics. Because he's just, I mean, again, he has great insights, but also he is delightful and a beacon of light. He's just a wonderful person.
Yeah. I am a fan of, we've had some screenwriters on before, but I want to have more comic book authors, because it is an art style that I have an incredible amount of respect for, because I've tried it before and failed miserably. Writing a comic book, people don't realize how hard it is. It is really hard. You've got to describe every panel, not just every panel, how the panels should fit. And you don't want to write that, every page has 6 panels and they're all exactly like, how are they going to align? And so props to comic book writers. Absolutely. Anybody else?
So the other person I thought of is a little new to me, I should say. I met her at World Fantasy, but Marina Lostetter is a hoot. I love chatting with her, and her writing is fantastic, and she was just a lot of fun.
Yeah,
so those are the people that I thought
excellent.
of.
Oh, very good.
I'm a little bit like, oh, I know a lot of other writers. Like, you just need a huge list, but those are the 3 that popped in my head first.
Yeah, no, that's great. I will reach out, see if they'd be willing to be on. That's very cool. Okay, so there's some folks I have to thank before we end here, before we get to our advice for everybody for the week. But first, thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. Thanks to Halisna CCO for their song Kids for the ad break. If you're in a band and you'd like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's song, so email that to me. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making this show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. Thank you always, Doug, for that. And I cannot forget to mention, Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipePublishing. So please go to NotAPipePublishing.com and check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate it and review it wherever you found it. Please check out Erin's 2 books that are coming out. The titles for those again are...
So Relics of Ruin comes out at the end of April, and Gift of Guthix comes out in May, which gives you plenty of time to read the first book. Well, for Relics of Ruin, gives you plenty of time to read Empire of Exiles, the first book of the Books of the Usurper series, so that you're ready for Relics of Ruin.
Yes. So, and when you read Empire of Exiles, rate and review. It really does make a difference to give that 5th star, to give, it doesn't have to be a long review, and you will make Erin's day. So please check that out and write that review. And for this show as well, click on that little thumbs up. And if you write a funny review, we'll read it on the show. So by all means, write a review. We'd appreciate it. Apparently, Apple is the place to review for podcasts. So if you're on Apple, those reviews, I understand, make a bigger difference. So if you're on Apple, feel doubly obligated. You now need to write a review. So Erin, I want you to remember some 3 things this week. Erin, what's your advice for everybody going into their week?
Okay, so my advice is you're probably not resting enough. So let yourself rest. It doesn't take away the good thing, the great things you've done, the great things you're going to do. It just gets you refreshed so you can do more.
Excellent. I completely agree. And my advice is related. It may take the form of rest, but I always say to folks, a novel without spaces would be gibberish, and our lives need spaces too. So don't ignore the spaces. And also, no matter how much you procrastinate, we're still proud of you.